Tracy drives you crazy, doesn't he?
All right, that's enough. I want Tracy dead!
Tracy, let's go! Good luck.
You have just said goodbye to oxygen.
Aren't you gonna frisk me?
Stupid cop.
Tracy?
Warren Beatty is Dick Tracy.
All right, hello everybody, and welcome back to Cult Musical Zone. And today we're going to talk about the criminally underrated cult classic, Dick Tracy. And today we have two special guests who also love Dick Tracy, and they're coming with their own experiences with this cult gem. So I guess the first thing we're going to do is just talk about the first time we were introduced to Dick Tracy. And Helena/Kathy, you can go first and talk about the first time you saw this gem.
Sure. Well, I mean, I was alive during the Batman Dick Tracy era, of course. So, I mean, it was everywhere because Batman had been such an enormous, enormous movie. They thought that Dick Tracy was going to be the next huge blockbuster, superhero thing. And so it had all the hype, all the buildup. McDonald's had like toys and lotteries and shit, and everything was Dick Tracy everywhere. And then when it came out, it kind of was like, the response was pretty poor to this. I mean, they had heavied up so much because people were still expecting Batman, with the sort of cocaine-ridden dialogue and gritty, dark stuff. But then Dick Tracy was like, "It's a musical." So I understand. So I actually didn't see it because I just didn't want to see it. I didn't see it because for some weird ass reason, my mom decided during the second two-thirds into the way of E.T. that she hated modern movies. And so we did not go to see a modern movie between E.T. and Jurassic Park. So that was how the family was with movies. So Dick Tracy was just not even a blip on the radar for me at the time. But I digress. I actually saw it because I'm a big fan of the Purple Stuff podcast, which is a shout out. Fantastic podcast. They talk about pop culture, and they had a big show about the Dick Tracy thing, which the hosts were much more into. And they talked about all the minutiae about all the toys and all the stuff that was going on and how everybody wanted to be, I think one of the guys wanted to be the villain Itchy. So he would just walk around just scratching himself all the time, which is amazing. So there was that. And then I watched it. That was about a year ago. So I've only seen it as of about a year ago. But I do have the Blu-ray, so.
As for me, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
As for me, I was a literal baby when this movie came out. I was like just born, so obviously my parents were going to take me to see it, but at some point I had like a Dick Tracy coloring book, I think, but I knew of it, and I knew of Dick Tracy my entire life, like both the movie and just like the property in of itself, and I actually didn't get around to watching it until this year. It had always been on my to-watch list, at the very least because I knew Al Pacino got nominated for an Oscar for this role. And it was something. I did know of its like Disney like building it up, mass marketing it as their Batman, and like you listen to the score of it, it's Danny Elfman doing very much kind of a sequel to his Batman score. Apparently, by the way, I just read, apparently Danny Elfman thought Warren Beatty was crazy. So, but watching this for the first time, it is without a doubt one of the most literal colorful movies I've ever seen. Like, it has both the noir style, but it's also incredibly colorful. So, and it's weird. I never thought of it as a musical until doing this. Like, I knew Madonna sang in it, but I just thought like, oh, they gave her a song, but it's like, oh no, she's got multiple songs in the movie. So, yeah.
And there's all out musical numbers in it too. I mean, once you really go back and watch it, there's like the more number, which is fantastic of it.
Mm-hmm.
First time I saw it, I don't remember, but because I grew up and I remember having the Breathless Mahoney doll. I don't know how I ended up with it, but I saw it a few years ago for the first time, and I was it just made me wonder why it's so criminally underrated, and it's so beautiful and it's so gorgeous. And like, movies like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, it's one of those movies that Disney has tried to bury. Um, Who Framed Roger Rabbit and both Dick Tracy were both going to be released under the Disney banner up until the last minute, and then they changed the touchstone. And, both Roger Rabbit and Dick Tracy have that noir sort of beautiful, just beautiful feel to it. And it's a shame that, especially in the climate we live in with the new Disney, I think Roger Rabbit and Dick Tracy will continue to be buried. So yeah, I think it's a gorgeous movie, and I think it's criminally underrated. I think it has all the ingredients to be a cult classic. Now, I wasn't really familiar with the comic strips, but the plot is pretty straightforward in terms of what's happening. What do y'all think about the story? And we'll get into Warren Beatty and Madonna and Al Pacino later.
Just kind of going off of mentioning Roger Rabbit, I will say I think Roger Rabbit's promoted a little bit more because that was probably more of a success. Whereas, as you alluded to, Dick Tracy was kind of like a mild success, which to Disney is not success. Because to Disney, it's either you get $10 billion at the box office or you don't. But that being said, back to the plot discussion. Yeah, it's very straightforward. And there's a part of me that thinks Warren Beatty juggles a little too much stuff happening in it. Like, he does the typical crime boss stuff with Al Pacino's character and stuff like that. But then the stuff with the kid, I think it would have been fine if he did that as just a very mild subplot. But then he tries to do that, and with Tess, his girlfriend, there's a part of me that felt like that kind of disrupted the more interesting stuff. Because when I think of, again, like you, James, I'm not as familiar with Dick Tracy, the comics and stuff like that. But from what I gathered, they were very basic, like, Dick Tracy, villain of the week, is doing this. Stop him. So, like, a part of me kind of wished they did that. But again, I think, as mentioned, they're probably trying to be like Batman, and Batman had a romantic subplot, but I felt like that was more tied to discussing Batman as a character, whereas this one is kind of like meanwhile, like, Dick Tracy's fighting this big crime syndicate in this city. Oh, and he's got his own personal, like, BS commitment stuff with his girlfriend. It's like,
and now he's got a kid.
Yeah,
Oh.
it's like, as we started talking a little bit earlier before the podcast started, I could have done without so many of the scenes with the kid.
When do we eat?
Yeah, when do we eat? That's literally all he does. It's like, when do we eat? When do we eat? It's like, okay, kid. And then he tries to, like, run off every single time Dick tries to do something nice to him. It's like, I think if that were me at one point, I'd be like, yep, okay, fine. I'm not going to get you a nice suit. Screw you then. I paid for like 50 meals for you at this point. But I say that as I'm basically dressed like him with my flat cap. But yeah, like, the stuff with the gangsters, like, watching Al Pacino try to become this, like, continue his crime syndicate while also running this nightclub in his own weird way is very entertaining, especially when you have all these interesting interesting characters played by this amazing cast. Like, that was one of the things I posted on my Facebook, like, after watching it, like, can we talk about how stacked the cast is? Like, it's like a who's who of movies of the time and whatnot. So, but I'll stop there because I'm rambling on.
No, definitely Warren Beatty called in some favors for this.
Oh yeah.
And that's for sure. I mean, he got all his industry folks, and I imagine they had a lot of fun doing it. But I was going to go back to why Disney moved this over to Touchstone. It's the same reason why they did Touchstone for Nightmare Before Christmas, which, funnily enough, is now like their big money maker. Like, they just beat the shit out of Nightmare Before Christmas merchandise and all that stuff. But at the time, because Nightmare Before Christmas it got a PG, so they're like, well, it can't be Disney. And so, since this was PG-13 and Roger Rabbit was PG-13, these were not the kind of movies that they wanted to have under the Disney banner because they were a little too rough. I mean, the murdering of the shoe in Roger Rabbit.
Oh,
I mean, for God's sake, you can't have that in a Disney movie. But
that was intense.
yeah, Shuey, R.I.P. But anyway, Dick Tracy, plot wise, I mean, I was familiar with the comics because my dad grew up in that era, kind of like he's about the same age as Warren Beatty. Was kind of a late dad for me. But I mean, he listened to the shows on the radio and he read the comics and stuff. So it was a little more sort of straightforward, and it was a very accurate representation of that kind of
Okay.
style. Yeah. So, um, yeah, good.
Dick Tracy reminds me a lot of the noir sort of subgenre of cult musicals with Streets of Fire and Bugsy Malone and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I don't know. I think it's gorgeous. I think it's incredibly gorgeous. Now, yeah, Dick Tracy, for whatever reason, was not marketed as a musical, even though it is a musical. I mean, Stephen Sondheim, when you think about all the stops that Warren Beatty pulled off, in terms of he had the best of the best of the best of the best, the best score, the best musical writer, the best director, the best everything, and so the best cast for as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, so getting into the music is really beautiful, and the music actually was critically praised. I mean, Madonna performed sooner or later at the Oscars with it. She took Michael Jackson as her date, and that song won the Oscar. But I think all the songs in the film are great. My favorite, of course, is More, and then I love Sooner or Later. And then there's the song Back in Business, and the song there's one song I just don't really care for, which is What Can You Lose, which is the duet between Madonna and the lounge
Andy
singer.
Patinkin. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What do you think about the music though? I think it's gorgeous.
I think it's amazing. I mean, the music was definitely a highlight of that. It's like surprise musical. It's just like
Yeah. It it's very much an I forget the actual term for it, like an in-universe musical where it's like the songs are being like people are aware of the songs being performed. It's not like here's the big song and dance number. Okay, everything back to normal. We're not going to acknowledge that everybody.
diegetic city. It's
Diegetic,
like
that's it.
yeah, it is the
Um,
most diegetic movie.
yeah. Yeah, that is definitely fascinating, and I'm not sure how much we want to spoil, but it's actually interesting like what they do with Madonna's character. They don't just make her the singer. Um, and actually, I actually love the duet she has with Mandy Patinkin because
Same.
I think people outside who don't pay attention to musicals don't really know that Mandy Patinkin is an amazing singer who does like I think people just know him as Inigo Montoya, which valid, great role, but like the man like is a legend on Broadway. So, but yeah, like they definitely fit the style, and I think I remember seeing Warren Beatty was like, no, like if we're gonna have songs in this, we are going to have songs in this. We are getting Sondheim. I'm gonna I'm gonna throw my money at this.
Yeah.
So in
Good
other
choice.
words, Warren Beatty was very much a spare no expense kind of guy with this movie.
Yeah. Labor of Love. He wanted to make a sequel too. I know he was so in love with this that he
Yeah.
wanted to do more, but then by the time he was able to start doing that, he was like 70.
We'll
Yeah.
get into the legacy in a minute. But yeah, the music. What do you think about the score and not necessarily Danny Elfman's score, but the musical numbers in the film?
Oh, I think they're great. I mean, they're very accurate to the time, which that's my big thing. It just gets under my skin. I'm very OCD when it comes to like musicals and movies that portray that kind of music. Like it has to be done just right for me to really believe it. It's like you can't have an electric bass in there. You have to be plucking the bass. I mean, it needs to sound right. It needs to be,
Yeah.
executed kind of perfectly. Sort of like how Annie was, with the songs on the radio. It's like that's totally a song that would be on the radio. But yeah, they're beautifully done. I love the sort of chorus girl kind of harkening back to musicals like 42nd Street kind of thing.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's sort of like if you took all the genres of movies at the time when Warren Beatty was a little boy, you have these extravagant musicals, you have the let's put on a play, you have film noir. It's like just mash that together. And of course, Madonna does a great job with the songs, acting, but songs plus plus.
Yeah, like I agree with you. I like that they stuck to the music of the time period, like the arrangement stuff like that. I don't really like when some musicals, like particularly modern day musicals, try to add like a modern sound to it that kind of clashes with
Yeah.
like the time period or the feel of it. Like there was a Christmas musical that came out on Netflix. I forget what it was. It had Forrest Whitaker and Keegan Michael Key in it, and I wanted to like it more, but like I don't know what it was. Like the music sounded like kind of generic pop stuff, and I felt like I don't know, it could have been more whimsical and Christmassy, but like I do think that can oftentimes affect the movie. Like would The Wizard of Oz have sounded, as timeless if it was like,
Swing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Probably why they cut the jitterbug.
Yeah.
So the brilliant thing about this particular movie when it comes to the soundtrack is that they released those songs on Madonna's I Am Breathless soundtrack.
Mhm.
I Am Breathless CD, which she promoted on the Blonde Ambition tour.
Yeah.
Which I thought was brilliant, was a brilliant marketing technique. Now, of course, what a lot of people don't know is that Madonna's hit Vogue is from the soundtrack of Dick Tracy, I Am Breathless. So that song was written by her for this film. And there's other songs that were written by her and Stephen Sondheim that were inspired by the film that didn't make it into the film. But Back in Business is on the I Am Breathless soundtrack, but she's singing it. I don't know why they chose not to have her sing it in the film. But yeah, I mean, the music's brilliant. And I think without Madonna, I don't know if the movie would have been as successful in terms of what it was aiming to do. There's a misconception that Warren Beatty and Madonna were together before the film started, but that's not the case. They met on the film.
Yeah.
And Madonna actually wasn't a shoo-in for the role of Breathless. Michelle Pfeiffer was in the running for it, and Samantha Fox. Quite a few people were in the running for Breathless, and Madonna wanted it so bad that she only got paid $35,000 for it. And she's like, I don't care if I don't get paid anything. I want to do this. And I think that says a lot about her character, not only her character of Breathless, but her character as a performer, which gets into the cast. I mean, Warren Beatty, of course, had the right to be Dick Tracy because he still, for all intents and purposes, owns the rights to the film and TV for Dick Tracy. So
And he looks like Dick Tracy.
he does, yeah.
He still owns the rights to this day, apparently.
Yeah, that's what we're saying. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But yes, so he, like you said, he called in a lot of favors for his friends with Al Pacino and Dustin Hoffman and Estelle Getty and all of these, and
Dick Van Dyke.
yes, all these wonderful people.
Mm-hmm.
So I think these characters are really larger than life, and they're like cartoon characters come to life. But I think the cast is brilliant, and I think they all do. And I just think Madonna this is one of Madonna's best roles. Just, I know that some think her acting's wooden in this, but I think she's very Jessica Rabbit, very Vixen. I think she's great. I think Breathless is an incredible character that has a lot of growth.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would definitely say this is her best leading performance. I think her best performance overall is from League of Their Own. Excuse me, my dog is whimpering at me. I don't know if he hears me talking with you guys or not. But yeah, the cast is phenomenal. Obviously the main guy that steals the show is Al Pacino. Thinking about like his scenes, the scene where like they're rehearsing that dance number and he's like dancing with them. A part of me wants to believe that the script just called for him to be like sitting and just shouting at them. But then Al Pacino, being as crazy as he is, just got up and started like dancing with them. And Warren Beatty's like, no. Let him do it. So I will say, so I just read this. We have two of his Warren Beatty's former Bonnie and Clyde cast members in this movie, Michael J. Pollard and Estelle Parsons. Gene Hackman was approached to be in this movie too, as Lips, the Paul Sorvino character, but apparently Gene Hackman said no, and that's because he had a miserable time during a previous Warren Beatty movie he worked on. So,
Mhm.
but that being said,
The
mhm,
makeup too. I mean,
yeah, that would have
all
been a lot.
extensive makeup, which that's an interesting part of the characters and the plot is that you notice that the more evil the characters get, the more heavily made up and disfigured they are.
Yeah.
Which is why it's fascinating that you have Madonna through the whole thing. I mean, she's like totally evil, but she's the most beautiful character. She's
Hmm.
the blank. But I love
Yeah.
it. I've heard the characters kind of described almost as like film noir Cenobites, which I think is kind of accurate
Oh,
because they're a
yeah.
little kind of like horrible monsters. And I mean, like flat top and stuff. I mean, that's something you see in your
Oh, Flat
nightmares.
Top.
It's nightmare fuel.
Flat Top himself is he's just got this creepy vibe to him. Like his face is just kind of like
Oh yeah,
weaselly and shit.
always sneery. Yeah,
By the
but
way, I do want to say real
Um,
quickly about Paul Sorvino. Like I just discovered like this year that he legit sang opera, and a part of me is like, why didn't this man do more musicals? Like I don't know if he just got typecast as the gangster character, but like just imagine what this man could have done in the musical world more. So
yeah.
rest in peace, Paul Sorvino.
but he was in Phantom. I mean, he was in the Reaper of the Genetic Opera and
Yeah,
in
yeah,
the
yeah,
Devil's
I was
Chronicle.
gonna say that. Yeah, I remembered seeing him sing in something, and that's what it was.
yeah. And I was just thinking like seeing him sing more, and like I've seen clips of him singing like Christmas songs, and it's like, man, like imagine this guy doing like other musicals. Like that would have been so great.
Mhm.
Like he could have revived opera in a way, like in the mainstream.
A mob opera.
There you go.
Yes.
Yes. But
A mopera.
But giving I guess, the ending away, I don't know if Breathless is a one-dimensional character because she, you think she is in the beginning, but I don't necessarily think she's evil. I mean, it's basically in that particular world, I think it's pretty kick-ass that she's the one pulling all the strings. The only thing that bothers me about her as that character is that voice that she has to pull off while
Mhm.
she's making all the calls.
The
But I
Lena
think,
Booch voice. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know.
weird smoker's voice kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, I just that was that was my only qualm about this film, and the only negative is that Breathless dies. But a part of me hopes that she didn't die and that maybe she's
Hmm.
just tricking and playing. I don't know, but I think it's a really cool. It was a very weird decision. I'm not familiar with the comics, but I think it was a weird decision to kill off Breathless, especially if they were hoping to make 2, 3, 4, 5 Dick Tracys. I mean,
Well, I mean, you have to consider Tess Trueheart is his true love. So, I mean, you really
yeah,
can't have Breathless. And the whole Breathless thing, she has that redemption at the end. That's why her death is poignant because it's like now at her death she realizes that all of this has been for evil and for nothing. So
Hmm.
that's a trope.
There's a part of me that thinks that, you know, just being the character deaths, I feel like Big Boy was going to be like a returning character if they made more sequels because like his death was underwhelming.
Mm.
Like he just like he does has like that Disney death of like falling down into the abyss, and it's like, really? That's how
That's
he
all.
died? Just ah.
Yeah.
He doesn't get like gunned down or run over or anything like that. Like I don't know, it seemed underwhelming. But like yeah, with Madonna's character, I'm trying to think of like a parallel character that I'm thinking of. Like the best I can think of is like maybe like Yojimbo or the Man with No Name in Fistful of Dollars, where it's like kind of playing all sides and whatever and trying to like fix something. In this case, it may just be getting back to a lifestyle where she's like her own her own agent or something like that, or she gets what she wants. In this case, it may be Dick Tracy. So, and I guess you could count her more as an anti-hero than a hero or a villain. So
Yeah.
she's not doing these things for malicious intent. She's not trying to build a criminal empire. She's doing
She's
this
trying
to
to
get
bring it down from the
yeah.
within. Yeah.
She's trying to get what she wants, which is just, you know, I guess in a way like be her own agent where she's not like under the control of somebody. Or
And
at
to
least
do
be
away with the crime. Yeah.
yeah.
very Michelle Pfeiffer Catwoman when you
Yep.
think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because, Michelle Pfeiffer, Breathless is abused, but I like how she doesn't give them the energy. Like, if she's abused and she's slapped and,
Yeah.
she doesn't act that way. She just, like,
Mm-hmm.
because I think she knows. You see that in her eyes that like she's gonna get them.
Yeah.
And
It's
I
very
don't.
Joan and Christina Crawford. It's that like slap, like
Movie. I was talking to my brother about this particular film, and because he's 8 years older than me, and he didn't really he didn't notice the huge impact that the film made. It sort of came and went along the lines of, do you remember the movie The Shadow with
oh
one of the
yeah,
Baldwins? I
I
used
knew
to
of
get
it.
the movie, yeah, I used to get this movie confused with The Shadow because it
yeah.
still has that weird
Well,
noir.
and the
Mm-hmm.
Rocketeer. So I mean, this
Oh
there were a
yeah.
whole bunch of follow-ons that were going to come in the giant success of this, and then it was kind of like, oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, Disney, The Rocketeer.
yeah, which is a great movie. I mean,
But with also Paul Sorvino.
yep.
There's that connection.
Yeah.
Um, so I guess because I was young, I was super, super young when this came out. What did it come in? Did it come out in 90 or 91?
90,
90.
90. It was
I
right
was,
on the heels of Batman. I mean,
Yep.
literally, Batman ends, Dick Tracy takes over.
yeah, because I was born in 1990.
Same here.
So
Yeah.
I do remember the doll,
I
and
mean,
the toys were really ugly. And I remember the breathless doll was like this big,
mhm.
and it was just plastic. I
There
don't
was a
know.
couple of them, and I guess one of them was anatomically correct. I guess
Oh.
it had nipples, which was very very scandalous. If you listen to the Purple Stuff podcast, they talk about the indelicate things done with that doll.
But by the
Well,
way,
y'all
just
brought that time that the last episode y'all talked about like how racy it was that you do see Madonna's breasts in the film. What do you think about some of the things that I guess I understand why Disney released it
yeah,
on
Discovered it.
yeah, it's like that and a lot of the double entendres and innuendos that they reference. It's like Disney's like, okay, we sometimes got some scandalous stuff in our movies, but we can't, like, we
Mhm.
literally cannot have Madonna's boobs on our record. So,
30 seconds, no more dick. I mean, there's so many dick jokes in there as well.
yeah,
So yeah.
the man's name is literally Dick.
Um,
So it's like,
and it was pretty brave of Disney to like I don't know if it was brave of Disney, but it was brave of Warren Beatty and the producers to hire Madonna because I mean this is right after
mhm,
Like a Prayer, which we all know
Mm-hmm.
basically made everybody the religious
Scotty.
right go crazy. And so
yeah,
for them to actually cast Madonna was actually pretty great. And I don't know. I think Madonna makes this movie. Warren Beatty is wonderful in this. I love how you see his face in shadows, and I think all of that was completely conscious. But I feel like his acting was a bit wooden in this film. I think he was taking it. He
too
was taking.
seriously.
Yes, I mean his character's the most serious, but the rest of the characters in the film are very larger than life.
Yeah,
It's a very one-dimensional character. I mean, Dick
yeah,
Tracy, it's like, I'm a gumshoe. I'm here to fight crime. I'm gonna go take
like
care of this crime and come back.
the most, like the only other aspect I can really think of him outside of being Mr. Goody Two Shoes 40s pulp hero is he has a hard time committing to his girlfriend. Like anytime he comes to like asking her to move in, he's like, then he turns into Jimmy Stewart basically. He's like, gosh, golly gee, Trash, I love you, but
You're starting to sound like Mumbles, which I can't stand.
Yep. But also just a minor note, watching him like there's a couple moments where it's like just knowing like like how the system works now and stuff like that. It's like there's certain moments where it's like, okay, yeah, these are the bad guys, but you're basically torturing them. Like with the big old lights on Mumbles and stuff like that. Like, yeah, they're the bad guys, but it's like, Dick, you gotta know the process, dude. You've been in the I don't know. So that's the weird thing. Like,
So I both John and I, of course, were fetuses when this was released. Do you remember anything? And you're just a little bit older. We're all the same age
I'm a lot
spiritually.
older. Yeah.
No. We're all
I'm a
the
77 model year over here. So yeah, I was a teenager. I couldn't be bothered. Yeah.
no. I meant like I was gonna ask. Do you remember? I don't know. Did you when it was coming out? I mean, was it promoted very well? Was it? How was
It was
it?
everywhere. I mean, it was obvious, like I said, this was going to be the next big blockbuster after Batman. So I mean, it was given an equal push to Batman. I mean, it wasn't like it came and went. It came and it stayed, and people were like I said, I mean, they had McDonald's toys. And they actually had the actors from the movie in the McDonald's commercials. So that's how much money they threw at this. Because you're not going to get Dustin Hoffman to be in a McDonald's commercial unless, there's some coin involved. So I mean,
Mm,
this was as big as that, and just fell with the sort of resounding thud, unfortunately.
Do you think it's because the way that Disney marketed it, or do they think that they banked on something? I don't know. It's really
Oh,
complicated.
you have to think about the time. I mean, Batman. Like I said, Batman had just come out and it was dark and it was gritty and it was nasty and it was mysterious and sexy. And so everybody was on the Batman train. They all wanted to be Jack Nicholson's Joker and all this kind of stuff. And it was so kind of gripping and engrossing to people that when they saw Dick Tracy, this like colorful quasi musical, it just didn't. It was kind of, I mean, we've talked about this before. It's like sometimes a movie comes out that's too nice for people at that particular time. And so people later will watch these movies and say, that's a really sweet movie and I really like how that played out. But at the time, it was too good for people, I think.
It
yeah,
wasn't like
well,
a bomb. It made like $147 million, I
But
think.
that's a Disney bomb, like you were
mhm.
saying, John. It was like if it doesn't do XYZ, it's the
Yeah. Like, and going off what you said about like Batman, like, around the time in the 80s, you had stuff coming out like the Frank Miller comics, which were definitely more dark and gritty. This wasn't Adam West Batman. Like, if this movie came out in the 60s, around the time of the Adam West Batman, then maybe this would have been more of a success.
Yep.
But like as people like this was definitely as we were getting into more dark and gritty stuff. Again, thanks to Batman and stuff like that. I don't think people like with Batman there were some complexities. You were starting to get into the psyche of Batman a little bit. Again, it wasn't just quick to the Batcave, Robin. It was like Batman's a kind of is a dude
It
with
was
messed up.
modern. Yeah,
Yeah.
just very
Mean,
modern.
meanwhile, Dick Tracy is you know yes, Chief, I'm on my way.
Right.
Rushing off to save the day.
It's sort of
There's
like
not.
the public consciousness was not that of a 60-year-old man, which is what this, people who have lived through that era would have been like, this is my thing. I love this.
Yeah.
But the marketing is really weird, I think, because I think they wanted adults to go see it, but yet at Disney
Oh yeah.
World they had like the characters walking around in a stage show and toys and things like that. Whereas Batman, yes, of course, sort of was targeted towards children, but it was very dark. I mean, they even tried to get Jack Nicholson for this film, if I'm not mistaken,
Yep.
because they
Sure they
really
did.
wanted to replicate so much of what Batman was doing. But I think but Roger Rabbit wasn't a bomb. I mean, Roger Rabbit, The Little Mermaid, which is my favorite movie, is equated with saving the Disney studios, which it did. But Roger Rabbit was the sort of the spark that was paved the way for The Little Mermaid.
Yeah.
But I don't know why Dick Tracy. I don't know why Dick Tracy failed. I've always tried to wrap my head around it. I don't know. Maybe it was just the time. I don't, or maybe
It
it was
just
because it was.
wasn't what people wanted right then.
Yeah.
They wanted something else and they didn't really get it.
Yeah. It just came out at the wrong time. That's
Yeah.
probably the best way to explain it. Like if it maybe came out a couple of years later, or came out a couple of years earlier, then it probably would have done well. It it kind of reminds me of to a weird extent like Disney's attempt with the Lone Ranger. I don't know if you guys saw that movie when it came out.
I didn't,
Uh,
but
okay, unlike Dick Tracy, I wouldn't really call that a good movie, especially since they cast a white dude as Tonto. But um, it's like both were attempts to try to like kind of revive an old franchise that people knew of, but
mhm.
probably didn't have as much, popularity. Whereas, and I think the thing with Dick, again, with Lone Ranger, I think it was kind of just a major mishap from a creative standpoint. Whereas Dick Tracy was definitely, as we've alluded to, just maybe came out a couple years sooner, or maybe a couple years later, probably would have done fine. So, like, maybe if it came out around the time of Batman Forever, then it probably would have done fine.
Oh yeah, would have been
Because,
done much
like,
better. Hmm.
yeah, like when things were, or maybe like when the animated series had kind of gone underway, because the animated series of Batman, very similar. Like, they have the colorful characters, And the
Oh,
very yeah, but meanwhile having the darker aspect to it, and so maybe if it came out a little bit later, it would have done fine. But like maybe some people saw Dick Tracy as kind of like a Disney's trying to cash grab on Batman. So,
I
but
think a lot of
still,
people saw it that way.
yeah, but obviously a lot of people. Go ahead.
Stay focused. The thing is, do you think it would have been better if Disney didn't release it? I love Disney, but do you think that like it had that sort of sanitized
I
legacy
don't
to
think it was
it?
I mean, it definitely wasn't. I don't think it was sanitized from the source material. I think
No.
it was as, as weird as the source material was with all the weird villains and stuff. So, I mean, if Warner Brothers had released it, it probably wouldn't have had as much musical. It probably would have been more realistic. I'm thinking like it would have been more like a sort of, it's a bad comparison, but like a Pennies from Heaven sort of a situation. If you've seen that one. I know that's a weird ass movie, but I think it would have been more that kind of flavor than like, bleh, colors and stuff. But at the same time, it's you're in a catch 22 because it's like the material is this colorful, crazy thing. You can't. I hate it when they take colorful properties like this and they turn them gritty. I kind of hate that. Which is why with Batman it works because Batman is inherently like a gritty kind of anti-hero that can go this way. But Dick Tracy, like you can't make him gritty. He's a good guy.
Yeah.
And the villains are Cenobites. So
And I just thought about this. It sounds like maybe Disney and Touchstone gave Warren Beatty a little too much carte blanche to do
oh yeah.
this. Because I just read that Beatty apparently has a 2 hour, like an over 2 hour cut of this movie. And Disney was kind of like, no, 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 cut that down. And so it could have been just like not reining in the main creative force behind it, like giving him his action figures and letting him have playtime a little too long.
Maybe audiences, I guess, around that time got used to dark sort of films, and like people
Absolutely.
forget. Like I remember when Batman Forever and Batman and Robin came out, people are like, "Oh, this is too campy. This is too campy." But they forget that Batman was campy at a particular period. So like that's why they're so shy to make Batman campy and colorful nowadays, where every Batman film has to be uber depressing. And I don't know, maybe like it's a reflection of what audiences wanted, and it's
Mm.
Yeah.
even. But Roger Rabbit was extremely campy, but it was dark. And I mean, Jessica Rabbit, hello. That's another movie Disney has not resurrected and has completely
Mhm.
buried.
But it's been mentioned a lot in the popular current zeitgeist lately. Everybody's been, I mean, since that, the scene with the shoe sort of resurfaced, everybody's like, "Oh my God, that traumatized me as a child." And everybody's like was on Twitter for a while talking about it. So I feel like it's going to come back into the public consciousness more and more. And
Right.
actually, we should mention they did this in this when it was shown with the follow-up Roger Rabbit cartoon. Roller Coaster Rabbit, I think it was.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
The director, Robert Zemeckis.
Yeah.
Zemeckis, yeah.
Yeah, he and then the original writer of the book of Roger Rabbit, which it's sort of along the same lines of what Disney has done with the legacy and not making a sequel. And there's two to three book sequels of Roger Rabbit that's really, really good. That continues on with the film. And he says, Disney doesn't like Roger and they especially don't like Jessica. And I mean, Roger Rabbit's available on Disney Plus, but Dick Tracy isn't. And it's like, I want more people to see this film. I guess which leads into the legacy. The soundtrack was incredibly successful. I mean, it paved the way for Madonna to do the Blonde Ambition tour and Vogue, etc. And of course, her and Warren Beatty were together, and you can see him in Madonna's documentary, and she bosses him around, which is so great to see because he was known. I didn't know much about Warren Beatty, but he was like known for being like
Total womanizer. Like him and Jack Nicholson, like the two worst guys, basically, in Hollywood at that time. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
They were gross.
it's also weird looking at that documentary because I've seen that. It's also weird, like just the two spat at each other. It's kind of like it's just like you just kind of want to get a bucket of popcorn and watch those two. Like, go on,
Well,
continue.
you get
We're not done here.
put two huge stars in a room. I mean, what's going to happen? That's going to
Yeah.
happen. They're
Their
either going to,
chemistry was great.
oh yeah, no, totally.
I think with Warren Beatty, doing some more research on him, I think he had met his match with Madonna.
Sure. Yes.
And I do remember I was looking at People magazine covers, and he proposed to Madonna, and Madonna wasn't ready for marriage. And then he's like, "Oh no, the ring was a friendship ring." And it's like, again, he tries to, like, cover up, I guess, his ego. And
Yeah.
then not too long after Madonna and he broke up, he married, was it Annette Bening?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So there's
He was
that.
like
I mean,
30 years younger than him.
It's good to be the
Something.
king.
They're still married, so
Good
yeah.
on them. Good on them.
yeah.
But yeah, the legacy leads into the legacy. I guess, it came and went, and it's still not talked about a lot. I mean, do you know anyone in your cult social circle that talks about this gem or anything?
Well, I mean, there definitely was, like I keep saying, the Purple Stuff podcast show on this. Go listen to it, because it is the perfect discussion of what it was like to be around during this time. If you were just a little bit younger than me, but a little bit older than you guys, like if you were in the right demographic age, which is very narrow for this, like it was a bop. So that's kind of the best I can say about it.
I definitely know at least a couple people who have seen this and love it a lot. And a lot of that could have been just it was a movie of their childhood. So, but this is definitely I think definitely a very cult, like a very much the definition of a cult movie, where it's like it probably came out, didn't get as much attention as they probably would have wanted, but it does have a very dedicated fan base. Not quite to the level of like Rocky Horror or Phantom of the Paradise or anything like that, but it definitely has a loyal group. Like I don't think you're going to see anybody dressed as Flat Top or anything. If they do that, then props to them for that makeup. But
I would definitely compare this to like the fandom for Cats, like how that was. Like that
okay,
came out, was expected to be this enormous movie, kind of failed. I mean, and also like Can't Stop the Music. I mean, that's kind of the thing. It's like all of these big, things that people are like, this is gonna put RSO in the black and it's gonna be great, and they do it, and it's like it's like the air coming out of the balloon kind of sound. But then people watch it later and they're like, this is some crazy shit.
it's kind of enjoyable popcorn shit. Like it's kind of like it's not maybe some people won't like it, but they won't be in pain while watching it. They'll be like, huh,
Mhm.
I kind of want to watch it again, but with a
Yeah.
group.
Yeah. Like that was
And-
visually pleasing. I want to watch it
Yeah.
again.
And legacy-wise, Warren Beatty and Disney had that expectation that was going to turn into a franchise. And there's two novels that are very hard to find that were sequels written for the book during the time, called Dick Tracy Goes to War and Dick Tracy Meets His Match. And they're very hard to find on Amazon and eBay. But so there was an expectation that it was going to lead into a franchise. Do you think, I don't know if it was successful, but like you said, it was to Disney, it's not successful unless it's number one for how many consecutive weeks,
And
which
plus,
is
I mean,
ridiculous.
it was a little bit of a joke at the time.
Oh, wow.
That's how, if I'm remembering kind of the flavor of coverage of it, was like, well, at Dick Tracy, it's number 4. It it just wasn't a hit, and people treated it like it wasn't a hit, even though it was a small hit. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a shame.
Yeah. It just didn't hit big enough to make that impression. And then, that impression can spiral the movie out into a whole other audience, kind of like Batman. It's like, if you have that spark that ignites the public, it goes viral, sort of like things go viral now. And like, Batman had that spark and it went viral. They were like flicking the lighter and the lighter was out of fluid. It's like, I just can't get this quite going, but here it is.
I wonder, I guess it's because I think there's many ingredients. Maybe because, parents didn't take their kids to see it, maybe because of, Madonna and the violence
Puberty.
and
Yeah. Well, and also consider the other movies that it was up against at the time. I mean, you have Batman 89. You were also coming off of like the Indiana Jones 3. I mean, there were so many other movies. Weird Al talks about this and how UHF was released. It was released the same weekend as like Batman, Indiana Jones, this, that, the other thing. It's like there's so much more going on in life right now than Dick Tracy at this juncture in 1990.
Yeah.
What do you think if it was moderately successful, which it was moderately successful, but if it was successful, what do you think Disney would have done with it in terms of franchise?
Merchandising.
Yep. You would, I'm just imagining getting like I could definitely see them doing like a Dick Tracy series on the Disney Channel, like animated or live action. Probably animated just so they don't have to do hours
To
of
follow on
makeup.
Batman. To follow on Batman animated.
There you go,
I
yeah.
mean, that would have been like
Actually,
the natural thing.
It could have been their gargoyles in a way, their other gargoyles.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, definitely.
Yep.
Dick Tracy would have been like a permanent walk around character at the Disney parks.
There would have been Dick Tracy Land, I mean, there would have been a whole like Toontown kind of was trying to be. That was kind of Roger Rabbit-ish initially, and then
then it's just Toontown. So
yeah.
But yeah, like definitely would have made the more movies.
So with that fact that it flopped, quote unquote, which I hate to say because it really didn't in my mind, but did it surprise you then that how many accolades it was nominated for and won then at the Academy Awards?
No, because a lot of things that get awards, aren't publicly popular. That's the whole thing. It's like awards and public response are kind of two separate things a lot of times.
Yeah, it's kind of like the difference between like on Rotten Tomatoes, the tomato meter and the audience scores. Like, a movie could get 97% rating from critics, but then 22 from audiences, which, by the way, I don't like audience reviews because they can be so easily swayed. But yeah, like, and also there's the whole thing with award shows of marketing and whatnot. That's a downside. But yeah, it doesn't surprise me too much that this got nominated for several Academy Awards, like for production and song. Like Sondheim is a darling of the Oscars. Like him and Ashman and Menken and stuff like that. So, and of course it's Disney technically. So of course the song was gonna get nominated at least.
Well, it had all those stars and stuff in it too. So of course that's gonna get noticed.
And the production design and the costuming, like you could tell the Academy members saw that and were like, that's getting nominated at least. I don't know what else is coming out this year. If the
Warren's a good guy. We'll nominate him. Yeah.
Like,
and it was really pretty rebellious and pretty awesome that you think Madonna was performing at the Oscars. I mean, I can't really put myself in that mindset, but I can only imagine, the Oscars are very, upper echelon. And then here comes Madonna and Michael Jackson at the Oscars together. And then Madonna performs dressed as Marilyn Monroe. I mean, that's pretty kick-ass when you think about it. And for her to win the Oscar, well, she didn't win the Oscar, but, for her to win an Oscar for a song she sang was pretty, well, Stephen Sondheim, but it was pretty kick-ass. But I don't understand the Al Pacino nomination for Best Supporting Actor, but hey.
He's good in it.
I think it was just because he was so crazy and cartoony, like crazier and cartoony than everybody else in that crazy cartoon, that they're like, you know what? Boom, you get nominated, Al.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look at the landscape of critically acclaimed movies from that time to understand, I don't know what he was up against. I mean, maybe everything else just really sucked.
I think he lost to Joe Pesci in Goodfellas. So maybe like everybody was so focused on that performance, they're like, oh, we gotta fill out the other four. These guys from Dances with Wolves, Al Pacino, and Dick Tracy.
Well, you have to put Al Pacino on there. I mean, on the card, at least on the card.
Yeah.
Actually, I was going to bring up one more topic, if I might. I don't know if we have time for it, but I was going to say you also have to think about what was going on in the world when this came out. Is like we were starting the Gulf War. So it's like, is this the right time for a Dick Tracy splashy, fun thing when, this is the first major war we've been in a while in the country. So it's like, is that going to be people's, it's not that we need escapism. It's just, it's kind of like, holy shit's getting serious, you know? It's almost kind of like now. It's like shit's getting serious.
Yeah, not unfortunately. And you make a point. It's like I guess if people are depressed, they don't want to see something happy. Is that what you think?
Overly happy, I mean, just over the top happy. It's kind of like, you know, cheer up, smile, nerds, you know?
I guess that's why, dark films and gritty films do so well. But I mean, I like the sort of, Little Shop of Horrors, I consider it a noir cult musical. It
Yes.
did well, but if you look at like Bugsy Malone, which did well over here in England, but not in the States, and Streets of Fire and this, noir movie musicals don't quite catch on. I don't know if it's because people don't get the noir thing or they just think it's too outdated. I don't know.
I
I
think people
love the
think
whole noir thing.
it's
Could
hokey.
be.
I think people think it's hokey.
I can see that.
Like
I
with
think,
the gangsters and stuff.
yeah, like whenever people think of modern day gangster movies, they think of like Scorsese or The Sopranos, which are legit in their own form. But like, I think the noir style is so associated with, stuff that your grandpa watched. Like it's not modern and hip and such like
Hmm.
that. So,
Yeah.
And look at the backgrounds. The backgrounds were hand painted.
oh yeah,
It's like
Beautiful. Yeah.
it,
Really did a beautiful job. Sorry, I'm
and
just in the car with these two, so
well, with these three, but do you want to touch upon that character that we haven't really talked about?
no,
no,
not really.
Was he not in Hook?
yes, he was the son.
In Hook, yeah. I know of him, but the character, God bless him, he's a good actor, but the character, I don't know, I guess it was tried to humanize Dick Tracy and tried to bring
It's a street urchin. I mean, the street
Yeah,
urchin was sort of part of, I mean, it's like Little Orphan Annie. It's like they're all little street urchins. You have to have that in this type of movie. It's like you just
yeah.
slot that right in.
Not to go too off topic here, but with the topic of Hook, Hook was originally going to be a musical, but so much stuff happened behind the scenes that they got rid of like all the songs except like one. So, but somewhere out there is the Hook musical we never got.
It's a shame that, movies like this flopped.
Mhm.
I don't know. I think it's maybe, there's an episode of RuPaul's Drag Race when they did like two different nights of Madonna, and they did a night of Madonna again, and one of the drag queens was Breathless Mahoney,
Hmm.
and they got it. And it was just, I don't know. I think that was great to see sort of some recognition. And I think, punks and gays always gravitate towards the forgotten.
Yeah,
And I like the joke that they made while Breathless was walking down the runway on Drag Race. And Michelle Visage goes, "Has anybody seen Dick?" And RuPaul goes, "Who?" And she goes, "Tracy." And
yeah.
it is. It's like, it's just so underrated. And I guess that leads into what do you think the legacy of Dick Tracy is today, if it does have one?
I would say it's definitely a very nostalgic legacy. Like I'm sure a lot of the fans of it may have come from the period of I remember watching this as a kid and loving it. As for people who may have watched it nowadays or came across it another way, they probably love it because it's such an oddity of the time. Like obviously, as we've referenced time and again, it's hinging a lot from Batman, but at the same time, it is its own separate thing. Like there is no other movie that looks like this. I don't know any other. I think outside of Curious George, I don't know any other man in a brightly yellow outfit. Um,
I'm thinking of that
but
movie Toys that with Robin Williams. That's what I'm thinking of.
oh
Like that
yeah,
had a very similar flavor
I haven't
that
seen
was
that movie,
around the
but
same time.
yeah, like definitely a movie where it's like again probably not a hit when it came out, but it has that loyal fan base and definitely audiences like a very steady fan base continuing to grow. Like that people just kind of being like, oh, yeah, I heard about this. Let me check it out. So
Yeah,
if
that
that,
It's
that
makes
makes
hard
sense.
to find online.
Hmm.
Although they still have a Blu-ray out. I mean, I got the Blu-ray off of Amazon. It was like $3, but
See, that's a damn shame.
uh, I mean, it makes it accessible. That's at least
Yeah.
something.
And it's weird. I wonder how much money Warren Beatty had to put in because I think he still owns the rights to it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But it's kind of sad. It's one of those properties that I don't think's profitable
yeah.
in the world that we live in now. I mean, could you see Dick Tracy if he took it to another studio,
What
for Netflix possibly to do a
what you
TV?
get if you make a different version of Dick Tracy is you get the shadow.
Okay.
I mean, so that exists. That's the toned down Dick Tracy, for what it's
That's
worth.
probably why I got them so confused as a kid
Hmm.
with the
I'm actually,
yellow and the taxi cab
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'm actually
and
trying
that
to
movie
imagine.
particularly.
I'm actually trying to imagine now who could play Dick Tracy if they did like a show on Netflix or something like that.
Don Draper, the guy that played Don Draper.
Oh,
What's his
John
name?
Hamm.
John Hamm.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. Yes, and Breathless could be
Who would
you
play
really
her?
Lady Gaga.
Who would play her? They always
Lady
ask who would
Gaga.
play her. Yeah, Lady Gaga, probably. I could see her doing it.
yeah,
That's the most obvious pick.
That's the obvious pick.
it is. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I don't know. I think it's still just like Roger Rabbit. It deserves to be uncovered. And Jessica Rabbit had her own section at Downtown Disney, and they took it off for a while. And I don't know. I think with current Disney culture, movies like Roger Rabbit and movies like Dick Tracy will probably, I think what they'll try to do. Nightmare Before Christmas is one of those very interesting beasts because, like you said, it was Touchstone, but now Disney's like Walt Disney Pictures Presents.
Hmm.
And I think that's why Tim Burton has distance. Tim Burton said he'll never work with Disney again after Dumbo. He said he'll never work with the Walt Disney Company again because they don't want dark and
No.
mysterious and mature anymore. And especially with the climate that it is now, Disney would never put Roger Rabbit or Dick Tracy on any type of merchandise or anything because it is very mature. Same thing with Splash. Splash is edited on Disney Plus. Her butt's
Actually,
taken.
I've actually heard that they unedited it. Like apparently you can't see your butt now.
But I didn't
Allegedly.
even. I mean, as a kid though, in the 90s, I didn't think anything about seeing Daryl Hannah's butt and her boobs and Splash. It didn't it wasn't like groundbreaking for me. But I guess the 80s and the 90s were a different time. I don't know.
Every movie in the 80s from the late 70s through the 80s had boobs in it. I mean, that's why they make the joke in Airplane where it's like during the plane, there's like just the tits in the middle of the screen. It's like that was just like
In a
the
P- in a-
prevalence of boobs.
In a PG rated movie.
Yeah. No, we grew
There
up
was.
seeing boobs everywhere.
Oh yeah. It
Yeah.
wasn't even if it'd be weird if you didn't see a movie with boobs.
Yeah. It's like now they don't make movies with boobs because everybody's seen it.
Everybody's offended by boobs nowadays, I guess.
Well, or it's just like, oh, yeah, those are boobs.
We
Okay.
have the internet now, so
Yeah. You can look it up.
I
You can
think
look at big boobs whenever.
right on. We love feminism. But I think Dick Tracy was like the last. There was a period when Disney was experimental with like Night Before Christmas, Watcher in the Woods, Return to Oz, Black Cauldron. Um, they were really, and they took gambles on a lot of these experimental films and they flopped, but they're really beloved. I think, Dick Tracy and Roger Rabbit and Return to Oz and Black Cauldron are better than most of the things they've done recently.
Black Cauldron I'm not too fond of, but like Return to Oz is a legit. I love that movie so much.
You
That
don't
movie
like it,
scared,
Alina?
that movie scared the shit out
I
of
can
me
see
as a
that.
kid.
But
Like,
I'm a sucker for large animatronics and stuff like that. So it's like for puppets and stuff. So it's kind of like I'm watching it as a kid, like
when I was a kid, I saw, because it was just on TV, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, probably when I was like 5 or 6 years old. And so I had a horror of electroshock therapy. And so I have this conversation when I talk about Return to Oz. It's like they must have done like a giant line of cocaine just down the meeting room table, and they just started at one end, and they're like, yeah, you know what would be great to put in a sequel to The Wizard of Oz, all the songs and all the dancing. Let's have Dorothy get electroshock therapy. It's like so much cocaine
It's
went
the
into that
80s.
decision. Yeah,
It was, but I mean, to me, that's the best Oz adaptation because it's really close to the books.
it's very accurate to the book.
Mm-hmm.
I just
And-
wish there was a little less mental torture in it.
True. But like Dick Tracy, for all intents and purposes, was close to the original comic book strips.
Very close, yeah.
Mm-hmm. From what I can tell.
And I guess this is what we'll leave on before we get into the other question. Now, during the 90s, was it just because it was a property that wasn't really considered profitable? I mean, do people in the 90s really remember or have any sort of nostalgia for Dick Tracy comic strips?
Probably not.
That
Maybe
probably was an
like
issue.
I mean, Dick Tracy was pre 1950. You have to think about that when it was in the public. It wasn't really, I mean, he was probably still around kind of vestigially in the 50s, but like this is like 40s, 30s stuff, like
Yeah.
prime in that time period. So if you had to live in that time, and even in the 80s, you're getting up into people that are 50, 60 years old. It's like that's why Warren Beatty is 50, 60 and he's, making this movie.
Mm-hmm.
There probably just wasn't an audience for it, or maybe they overreached and thought that there was an audience for it.
Yeah.
I think Warren Beatty talked a good game and made it like, we're going to resurrect this and really bring it back, and everyone's going to love it. And everyone was like,
Yeah.
oh, I've heard the name,
Yeah, I think the general reaction was very much just like,
Mhm.
whatever.
Which is a shame because I think it has a lot of merits. Now,
Yeah.
I haven't asked this question in a bit, but if you had to, I don't have an answer. Well, there's a very obvious answer, but if you had to name, I guess, the cult that would follow this particular show, what would you call them?
I'll be polite and I'll say the Tracys.
Oh,
Or the Tracers. Something like that.
I like that. I'm going to have to think about it. So you go. I'm still
I was just going to say the
ruminating.
Dick.
The Dicks. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know what I would call followers of Dick Tracy.
Kids.
Bloodhounds, maybe? Detectives? Detectives? No, that's
No,
awful.
no.
That's bad.
That's campy.
Strike that from the record. Anyway.
I'm trying to remember, did Dick Tracy's villains have a gang name?
I think they did, but I can't remember it.
I remember all the ludicrous names and whatnot, but I don't remember if they actually had like a gang name. So maybe the Big Boys. That could be.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, that's just making me think of Big Boy from Outcast. So.
Oh God. One interesting tidbit is that you don't really hear what city this takes place in, but I did a little research, and it's supposed to take place in Chicago.
That makes sense.
Whereas, Streets of Fire takes place in some sort of New York, dystopian New York, and Batman, Gotham City is, for all intents and purposes, New York City. Which, I don't know, is that really weird? You see the Statue of Liberty in Batman Forever, which is really strange because it's supposed to be Gotham, but whatever, I digress. Yeah. But I know I love the whole night noir sort of theme, and I miss that. I miss those types of films. I think it's product of its generation. Hopefully we can get back into movies like this, but I feel like I'm bad talking about those good old days. But I mean, movies were great.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it now, it's like the new noir is stuff, movies and shows that are made from the 80s, like crime things from the 80s. Like we're throwing back to the 80s. That's like them throwing back to the 40s. Now.
That's kind of scary to think about, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was just thinking.
We old, yeah.
Yeah.
So the link between the 40s and the 80s would have been the link between the 80s and now.
So now it's 20s, it's 40 years. Yeah.
Oh God.
40 years sunset, yeah.
Like the show on Netflix, that 90s show. I'm like.
Yeah. Oh man. Which is now making me think like, okay, some old director's gonna try to make a movie based off they're gonna try to make like another Miami Vice movie or whatever. So he's trying to make Miami Vice again.
In 20
Or-
years, it's going to be like the Britney Spears show or something like that, or the thousands, the 2000 show. Oh,
Oh
Oh
God.
my God.
everybody's going to have
Um,
those underwear that come up where you just see the little thong in the back.
the low rise jeans and
Yep, low-rise jeans.
the juicy pants and stuff like that, and
Yeah.
Maybe you
and
can answer this, Helena. After this movie, we know Madonna went on to do Evita, and she went on to do other films. What happened to Warren Beatty after this movie? Did he just sort of
I think
trickle out?
he kind of just sort of retired kind of thing. I think he just kind of faded out a little bit, as far as I know. I don't know much about it, but
he's done a couple movies. I think he did Bugsy after this movie,
mm,
which got some recognition. I think he did that movie with Annette Bening, which that may be when they met. He did another movie where he played Howard Hughes that came out a couple of years ago with it also had Lily Collins in it. And that's definitely a movie where you could tell he wrote it and directed, because there's a scene where he and Lily Collins are like making out and it's kind of gross. So like he's still out there. I think he's just kind of picking and choosing when to come out and do movies.
He still hasn't given up on a Dick Tracy too. He keeps
No,
talking about it every few years, and I'm like,
still owns the
okay.
rights.
let it die. It's okay.
In an alternate universe, Dick Tracy would have done well, and they would have had subsequent sequels, and Madonna and Warren Beatty would have made it work. Because it's weird, because this happened right after her tumultuous relationship with Sean Penn.
Sorry, I don't like him
Yeah.
for other reasons.
He
Many
was handsome.
opinions. Many opinions.
About Sean Penn?
Good
just
actor, terrible person.
about Madonna, Sean Penn. I mean, they were such polarizing characters for the country at that time.
Yeah.
Oh. See, I like to hear about these stories because I was so young that I didn't really realize, like, I thought they were like America's sweethearts.
Oh no, they were like fighting, and like they were always like, is he beating up on her? Is she beating up on him? It's like their relationship was tumult in the tabloids for sure.
And maybe that was one of the reasons that people were like, Madonna, when she was cast as Breathless, possibly? I don't know.
Maybe. But then again, Madonna was always such a force of personality. I don't follow Madonna. I don't listen to her music. But from what I could tell, she was like a fuck you, I'm gonna do what I want kind of pop star. Like,
Well,
from what I can tell.
that's what's interesting, because when she came on the scene, I mean, I remember this very clearly when I was a kid. It's like she came on as the flavor of the month pop star. She didn't emerge as the fully formed Madonna that we see now. I mean, she had her, it was kind of like everybody at that time that was a pop star had a look. Like Boy George had the Boy George look, and Madonna had a particular Madonna look, like you see in Desperately Seeking Susan. And it just created all of those artists that would come out would create these huge fashion trends. And so I remember everybody wanted to have the Madonna clothes, to dress like her. I mean, I remember I had to beg my parents to let me have like a belly shirt, that ended before my belly button. Like, I argued like I was in a court, like Supreme Court argument about that shirt, because it was like Madonna that I had seen on TV. So, and she wasn't like fuck you back then. That was when she was kind of America's sweetheart, but she was a little bit punk, but she wasn't as punk as Cyndi Lauper. So that's kind of how that. And then when she started to do more things that were more, I mean, especially with Like a Prayer, that was when the shit hit the fan with Madonna and the public. I mean, that was huge. And so then that was like, it was kind of like Britney or Hannah Montana, like what's her name? When she did the thing at the Grammys or whatever it was she did, like it was like, hey, Hannah Montana, no, So.
And maybe that was one of the reasons that when Madonna was cast, people were like, don't want to take my kids to see Madonna. I don't know.
Oh no, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was the Like a Prayer. I mean, you've got Jesus on the cross in the video, and he's black. I mean, God forbid. I mean, he's taboo. Yeah.
And they kiss and make out.
Oh yeah, no, nope. That was Exorcist level of nope at that time.
I'm really surprised Disney took a chance to say, I love Madonna, but I'm surprised they took a chance and said, yeah, we'll cast Madonna.
Well, that falls into the whole idea of them having, they gave Warren Beatty money and said, go make your thing, and they didn't supervise him.
Yeah.
So I think they ended up with Madonna more than Madonna ended up with them.
Maybe at most
And-
Disney was like, is she popular? Will she make us money? Okay.
And maybe that's one of the reasons it was moderately successful because of Madonna.
Stupid.
Entirely possible. Yeah. You can't have a
And-
kids movie with Madonna at that time after that, like a
No.
prayer stunt. Yeah.
We could have had Breathless Mahoney walking around Disney World, y'all.
Ooh. Oh. That would have been something.
Well, you still have Jessica. Well, you don't anymore, but you had Jessica and Roger Rabbit walking around Disney World. But the way that they, the walk around characters for Jessica Rabbit, it was so terrifying. It wasn't like a lady in a beautiful red velvet dress. It was like a cartoon character with a big plastic face, and it was terrifying.
Like that time that Heidi Klum dressed up like her, that was a thing.
That was terrifying.
Yeah, horrible. Did you see her one this year where she's the worm?
Yes.
My friend Paul Komoda sculpted that worm. I'm very proud of him. So big up to Paul
Dang.
for the Heidi Klum worm sculpture.
Oh my God! Everybody and anybody.
It's fun.
That's fucking cool.
Well,
Thanks.
thank y'all for coming. Next time we're going to talk about one of my favorite, but one of my hard to get through cult musicals, which is Forbidden Zone.
Yeah.
Don't know that one.
Danny Elfman.
Oh, yep,
Hmm.
right here on my arm. Yep, right. There we go.
Oh,
He's
cool.
right there. Yep.
So, John, I will send you that film,
Okay.
and you can watch it. It's beyond words. That's all I can say, but it's beyond explanation.
Okay.
Yep.
Bring it.
But it's brilliant.
Bring it on.
Mystic Knights of the Oingo Boingo.
Yes.
But thank y'all so much for being
No
here.
problem.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me again.
1 second. Hold on.